In the modern world, where you can ask an assistant in your pocket to update your calendar or pull up a website, it has never been more evident that our link to the digital world has become inextricable from our lives. With the connection and our online presence increasing, it logically follows that bullies would follow suit. Not only adapting to a new and less directly consequence-riddled environment, but also finding new and often horrifying ways to enact their torment. Like so many, director Peter John Ross is versed in attempting to survive a vindictive online and, at times, real-world presence. While no stranger to the medium of film, this, in Ross' own words, is more than just a documentary, but a shield against rather outrageous defamation. It also balances being an expose on misinformation, online toxicity, and the bizarre inherent protection that the behavior portrayed perpetrated online carries. Social Media Monster is a fascinating and harrowing documentary due to its relatability. Who, at one point or another in their life, hasn't come across a vicious comment online levied for little reason other than a fundamental disagreement? Though in the case that Peter John Ross documents that swirls around his life in the town of St. Joseph, Missouri, the reasoning boils down to less than a disagreement. When one man, Matthew Burdick, walks up to an IHOP and reports an alleged assault occurring in the parking lot, this one seemingly good deed unleashes a firestorm. The ripples affected locals, all the way up to the city council, and even reached the FBI. After feeling his remarks and report of violence aren't being taken seriously enough, Burdick confronts not only people working at the IHOP, but also patrons of the establishment. The patrons in particular reach a tipping point and exchange insults with him rather rapidly. He films what he claims is a video of him being threatened, which ends up being a film proving quite the opposite. When he demands that IHOP calls law enforcement and said officers don't perform how he expects, he hunts them down and demands justice. In this case, the two responding officers' badges. Categorically, given even this minor context, it's easy to see how events spiraled out of control. After this initial incident, the city council and law enforcement in the city then received an email detailing an alleged hate crime, Burdick being a self-proclaimed member of the LGBTQIA+ family. When physical demands make little impact, the battle is taken online. A blog entitled The Daily Independent Journal is started, which regularly publishes hit pieces on locals who strike even the most minor nerve on Burdick. Facebook users are also employed not only to promote the journal, but help spread endless heaps of misinformation. It becomes this singular man's mission to expose what he perceives as the city's corruption and dismantle it life by life. While the harrowingly bizarre reality that Ross and others experience plays out, Social Media Monster continually circles a few key things. The level of disregard in response to violence that's encapsulated within online posts. With Burdick at one point threatening nuclear terrorism after thousands of alarming comments posts, only to receive a minor law enforcement-related response. And the fact that companies who've consistently pledged to do better never seem to step in and hold their platform accountable. A concept reinforced several times by a video spliced in of Mark Zuckerberg's keynote related to how Facebook plans to do better policing abuse and hate speech on the platform. Mostly, the response seems to stem from the fact that the internet is seen as a blasé environment where nothing is to be taken seriously. It's worth pointing out that Facebook and others have, in recent years, seen an uptick of outcries against their lack of policing situations mirroring what we see. Ross very clearly positions social media to be broader than just Facebook. It's a system on the whole that allows this type of behavior, with each allowed post that emboldens since inflates. Internet trolls seeking their next form of validation always want to go bigger due to the widespread attention that some, like his subject, get, whether good or bad. As these details mount, more increasingly absurd scenarios play out mostly from videos Burdick himself has uploaded and the film interstitials talking head interviews next to them. Cycling through the director himself, local city councilman Brian Myers, and members of local news outlets and bands comprising the rest. They provide context to well-documented interactions and are cut in and out to create a dialogue between themselves and the subject in a way that lends a specific aesthetic. One that lands between an addictive true crime podcast and a bizarre rabbit hole that feels scarily accessible to the viewer. sharing a handful of characteristics that many of the younger generation could also attribute to conversations had on social media itself. On one little aside, there is also an element, notably absent for a documentary, bias. Given the events that transpired and their ramifications on Ross and the numerous others affected by them, it seems valid to be direct. There is a spicy conversation style deployed from the jump. Social media monster never inflates claims, and there are cold, hard facts at every turn. The receipts could probably reach the atmosphere by now. But Ross' direct inclusion in front and behind the camera has had me grappling with a personal sense of the term documentary. While this technically is one, by and large, it could be considered a few other things as well. It all comes down to the immediate connection between the filmmaker and the subject. Now again, I do not fault that in the slightest. I sympathize with the double-edged sword of it. It will allow many viewers an easy gateway into connecting with a film that, at times, is quite rough to absorb contextually. I still can't help but feel without that clear divide between creator and subject, its themes lose some steam as it tries to wrap up. Social Media Monster is terrifying and thoroughly engaging. While it feels more like a one-sided piece because that is how it is crafted, it deftly examines an online culture that has only grown in prevalence in the 21st century. The events it captures, the comments one man makes, and how he suffers at the time. No consequences must be seen to be believed. Exceedingly effectively, a handful of comments and videos of Matthew Burdick speaking play while news clips of domestic terrorism play in the background of the back end. Viewers hear news anchors comment how the FBI and others had been notified before each horrific incident took place. And again, while horrific threats of violence with increasing credibility are hurled at a small town, nothing seems to be being done. Not without brevity, thanks to the interviews and special appearance of local band The Rammy Memo, director Peter John Ross captures and needles a sense of dread throughout. He brings home his rallying cry that something needs to be about online culture. Social Media Monster will be streaming on Prime Video on May 31st.